exorcism films.
Yeah.
Because you usually also have like a girl in the threshold of puberty that is transforming into a scary monster, like in Carrie also. And The Exorcist is one example for this, but really all exorcism films. And there have been many the past few years. Yeah, and I think what makes The Exorcist kind of comparable to Carrie is that it was also made in the 70s. And we also see a bleeding female body. At first sight, it's not period blood. But if you start analyzing it, there's a lot in there that hints to the fact that the blood that we see is symbolic for period blood. So if I remember that correctly, the first instance that Regan, the main character's body in The Exorcist, is bleeding is because of a medical procedure that she has to go through. And although she's bleeding from the neck, there is a scene where we can see the pool of blood in her pubic area and her legs. And then later in the film, there's a scene in which blood is actually pouring from her vagina. Where her vagina is kind of a wound. Again, if I remember that correctly, it's really unclear why she's actually bleeding from her vagina, but it's clearly, I think, a reference to menstruation.
Yeah, I mean, at one point, I think she takes a crucifix and like masturbates with it.
Oh,
but
yeah.
But I don't know that's why she's bleeding from her like vaginal area. The Exorcist.
Yeah, it's a lovely film. Yeah, but I think it's a very clear reference to menstruation, you know, at least on a symbolic level. Yeah. So a lot of times, awakening, active sexuality is punished, and a lot of times menarche is kind of a symbol for that. And for me, in the 1976 version of Carrie, that was very particularly uncomfortable because girls and women are so objectified. But the fact that they could be or could become sexual subjects is kind of the looming specter throughout the film. So there's the figure of the mother who's kind of an agent of patriarchy. She keeps on preaching about the sins of womanhood, the sins of the body, the sins of sexuality. So this is a way in which this trope is kind of played over and over. Also, Creed describes the mother herself as kind of a patriarchal stereotype because she's the sexually unfulfilled woman. And then what I was thinking is that what's largely ignored is this aspect of rape, because she describes the night in which Carrie was, or in which the night of conception, you know, when she and her husband had sex. And the way she describes it to me sounded like rape. You know, I think she says, when he put it in me. And then I was thinking maybe her problem with sexuality, that could also be a result of trauma. But that's, of course, not. There's no backstory to her, like, her behavior. So we don't really know. But this is just something that I thought. In the film, as I said, menarche is kind of the outward sign of the onset of puberty, and Creed writes, the girl's transformation into witch or female devil follows on from the onset of menarche, and in Carrie, that leads to her destroying her family, which is her mother, destroying her house, destroying her community, and killing everyone. So this is how monstrous menstruation is in Carrie.
Yeah, there's it's funny, there's a movie from, oh crap, I'm not going to remember what year it is, from 2000. It's a Canadian werewolf horror film called Ginger Snaps. And it's about menstruation too, but it's about kind of two outcast girls who are sisters, and one of them starts her period, and the night that she gets her period for the first time, she gets attacked by a werewolf. Because it can smell the blood, and it's been kind of hunting dogs around the area, and it smells her blood and attacks her, and then they end up killing the werewolf. Well, the sister becomes a werewolf and then takes revenge on all of the people who treated them like shit, and it's great. It's like, it's like the opposite of of Carrie, because she gets her period, but it's like super empowering because it turns her into this like animal who like fights the patriarchy. But she has sex with people, but it's like on her terms, and then she turns people. There's this one scene where one of the guys she's had sex with ends up pissing blood, and it looks like he's getting his period because he's pissing blood, so and it's like perfect.
Ginger Snaps. I need to watch this. Yes. I need to watch it.
And there are 3 of them. There's like a handful of movies. They are totally worth watching.
Yeah.
I really, the special effects on it are criticized, but it's I think it's a great movie. Yeah. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it sounds like the female and empowering version of this male anxiety around menstruation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this whole idea of her turning into a werewolf as she gets her period is the same idea of like a metaphor for puberty, but it's not like this negative, you know, they have power. And they can take revenge instead of being victimized. It's great.
Yeah. Talking about animals, Creed also, I mean, I don't know how to bring it back to the topic, but
yeah, that's fine.
I think it wasn't that bad. No. Creed also says, which I found interesting, don't really know what to make of it, but she says that in the film, and apparently there's also something that comes up in other horror films, there is this link between women and pigs. So in The Exorcist, we have the scene where Regan shouts, "The sow is mine." And in Carrie, she's drenched in pig's blood. And also in the scene before prom, when the girls actually get the pig blood, they keep referring to women as pigs. And then she says, well, it's because both pigs and women bleed. And then also pigs are kind of associated with the grotesque, disgusting body. So yeah, I found that interesting. Yeah. I don't know what to make of it.
If you think about the kosher and Islamic halal restrictions on eating pork, they talk about pigs being kind of dirty animals, and they did have diseases. Most pork these days doesn't have trichinosis and other types of diseases because they're raised differently and cleaner and whatever. But yeah, I mean, we've seen that women who have periods are also shunned by these same cultures and told not to be part of religious ceremonies. So this kind of connection between pigs and women, particularly in terms of menstruating women, I can see what she's saying there.
Yeah. Especially because the flow of blood is, I think, in our imagination connected to pigs, because there's also the saying to bleed like a pig. At least we have it in German. Yes. Yeah. And so the film is very much about bleeding and about the terrifying powers of blood, menstrual blood, and also about how blood flow is kind of one of the initiating moments for women into womanhood.
Yeah.
And there are many instances in the film where blood is very prominent. There's, of course, the first flow of menstrual blood. We have the pig blood in the end. Then we have the washing off of blood in the very end, which I find also very, very interesting. I talked briefly about this because it's not just a mirror to like the showering scene, but it could also be like analyzed in religious terms. When we talked about menstruation taboos, we talked about the symbolic or ritualistic cleansing that women have to go through in some cultures. So, and it also reminded me of that. So she goes home, she lies down in this fetal position in the bathtub and washes off both blood and makeup, which are both signs of womanhood. Then there's this mixture of blood and water, and she kind of cleanses herself. And I think that's interesting. So another instance of blood in the very end is her mother's wounds, right? And then Jesus' wounds.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a lot of mirroring and a lot of symbolism that can be drawn in this film. I think that Brian De Palma actually does a pretty good job of showing that mirroring and that symbolism in the movie, despite the other kind of shortfalls, the like really kind of voyeuristic male gaze, but that's to be expected in most films in the 70s.
So I have a question. Does the English language version of Carrie have a subtitle?
There is a subtitle. I mean, there are subtitles for it, yes.
Because the German version is called...
Oh, you mean the title? Does the title have a subtitle? I don't believe so.
Because I think in English it's just called Carrie. And interestingly, in German it's called Carrie, des Satans jüngste Tochter. Which means Satan's youngest daughter.
What?
Which... Why? I don't understand.
I don't understand because she's not actually satanic. I mean, she just...
And that's my question. Why is she the devil's daughter? Like, what exactly is evil about her except the fact that she menstruates, right? So I think that the German title kind of already establishes that menstruation is something very monstrous via the title, because she's literally called Satan's daughter. Like, what is going on?
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
In English, so there's no subtitle on the film. The novel, the first edition novel has Carrie, a novel of a girl with frightening power.
Which is something very different.
Read from that what you will, but that's not like Satan's daughter.
No. Satan's youngest daughter, even. So apparently...
As though there are older daughters.
Apparently there are more of us. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, no, there is definitely not a subtitle on the title in in English.
Yeah, I just thought that's interesting. And I think it gives the whole thing a whole nother layer of meaning.
Agreed. It totally changes the way that you watch the film.
Yeah. And it makes it worse, I think, from a feminist perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And Creed also writes, and I think this is very important, quote, "The monstrous feminine is constructed as an abject figure because she threatens the symbolic order. Woman is not by her very nature an abject being. Her representation in popular discourses as monstrous is a function of the ideological project of the horror film, a project designed to perpetuate the belief that woman's monstrous nature is inextricably bound up with her difference as man's sexual other." So this is important to stress because there's nothing, of course, nothing inherently monstrous about women, about female bodies, about female reproductive functions or bodily functions. But
they're natural. Yeah. They are normal and natural.
But it's the construction of these things in patriarchal imagery, in patriarchal culture that makes it monstrous, right? So, and that construction has a long history, as we've pointed out again and again throughout our menstruation series.
Well, and it makes it monstrous. It makes it something to be silent about or silenced about, and something that we as a society choose not to emphasize because we are ashamed of it, because we're told that it's monstrous, because we're told that it's abnormal, even though it is absolutely the most natural thing that a person's body can do.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you know, if you've listened to our episodes on menstruation, you know that the vilification of menstruation and the construction as monstrous of like female bodies has a very long history. And if you want to learn more about that, then listen to the last, I think, 3 episodes about menstruation, because they will also give you a backstory to what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Okay, so I talked about how much I felt like the 1976 version of Carrie is a male fantasy. So I was really excited when in 2013 the remake came out, because it's made by a woman, and it's not just any woman but Kimberly Peirce, and she made one of my favorite films, which is Boys Don't Cry.
Yeah.
Which has one of the best queer sex scenes ever, by the way, but that's just a side note. So she did queer films and feminist films, and 2013 she did Carrie. But I was really disappointed when I watched it. I didn't really like it, although I think it's still better than the 1976 version.
I think it's too close to the 19... Yeah. I mean, I think there are additional things to talk about in the 2013 version, but I think it's a pretty faithful remake.
Yeah, and that's what I didn't like.
With extra shit added in.
Yeah, that's what I didn't like about it. And maybe we should just talk quickly about what is different, because other than that, it doesn't really make a difference, I think. So
no, agreed.
It's basically the same film with sometimes the perspective is a bit different, but yeah. So the film starts differently with a different scene. In the beginning, we see Carrie's mom's house where she lives. And by the way, she's played by Julianne Moore, who's great. Yeah. And we hear her terrifying screaming, and we don't know what's going on. And then we see that she's giving birth, right?
Which, okay, neither of us want children, so agreed. Giving birth, awful.
But, you know, what I thought when I watched it is, again, there is a mixture of water and blood, because we see on like the stairs, there is like what's it called? The water from the,
placenta?
Yeah, exactly. And then her blood.
Amniotic sac?
Yeah. And then her blood when she's giving birth. And also, it again starts with a scene that is constructing women's reproductive functions as monstrous, not menstruation, but giving birth.
Honestly, though, giving birth is no fucking walk in the park.
It's true. I'm not saying that it's... I'm not saying that it's a walk in the park. I'm just saying that it starts with a different function of the female body. And it's, again, terrifying, you know, also because, not just because of the physical, like, of the gore and everything, but because she doesn't know what's happening. She's crying for help, and she thinks it's cancer.
Which, like, I just don't understand. But, I mean, I guess if you think that you being pregnant is, like, a curse from God, then you think that it's... You know.
Yeah, but apparently, like, the way that I understand it is that she didn't even know that she's pregnant, which is weird.
Yeah, sure.
She thought it's cancer. So again, we have a woman that doesn't know what's going on with her body. And then we see baby Carrie. She's full of blood. Her mom wants to kill her immediately, but she doesn't. And then we see her